So how do we find ourselves? How do we answer the question of who we are and why we're here and what we're doing in life? Well, along my journey, I've discovered some valuable techniques, tests, and perspectives through which to do this. And for me, once I started to engage with these, my level of self-awareness and reflection went through the roof. I have been astonished by how much clarity some of the things I'm about to talk to you have given me. And what I want to begin with is very simple, but highly effective, and maybe surprisingly so for some of you. And this is using personality tests. Now, am I a tiger? Am I a lion? Am I a giraffe? No, I'm not talking about those type of personality tests, the one you see on your news feed and procrastinate on. I'm talking about real, research-backed, highly scientific psychology psychometric tests. And there's a couple that I believe really rise to the top in terms of how much perspective and insight they're able to give you. And this is what I'm going to begin by outlining now. So, the first one I would recommend is the 16 personalities test. And again, it isn't going to tell you if you're a dog, you're a cat, you're a Butterfree, or a Pikachu. This is based on the Myers-Briggs test, which is one of the oldest and most established personality tests in psychology. And what this does, it measures you on a spectrum of 4 different personality components. And for each result on each spectrum, you get assigned a letter. And there are 16 different combinations of letters that you can get, and you get that 4-letter code at the end. Using that 4-letter code, you can identify which of the 16 personalities you are. Now, I'd highly recommend doing this through 16personalities.com, because here they give you a really jazzy, quirky report of what your results actually mean. It doesn't just label you as a Pikachu or a giraffe. It tells you what you are, and then it starts to break down in terms of your hobbies, lifestyle, career, relationships, marriage, children, how best to approach each of these areas. And this is all for free. It's incredible value, and it's a really nice, simple introduction to personality and starting to pick out what type of person you are and how to best express yourself across those different domains that I just mentioned. Now, another test that I really love is the VIA Strengths Test. We as humans, positive psychology has found, it's used research and studies, and it's identified that we as humans all share 22 character strengths. And these character strengths are categorized into 6 virtues. And what this test does, identifies how much you express each of the 22 strengths, and then how are these strengths categorize into your virtues, and what are your highest virtues. Now, everyone expresses their strengths to a different degree, but what we're really looking for from this test is your top 6 strengths. These are your signature strengths. And the idea behind the strengths test is that in society nowadays, there's often too much of a focus on weakness and criticism and feedback, and seeking to bring up the things that we're not good at and make the things that we're not good at decent or okay. But what the strengths test aims to do is not to make your life okay, but to go from good to great. And you do this not by bringing up your weaknesses, but by exemplifying and typifying your strengths, by expressing these strengths fully and vibrantly into the world. And what this test allows you to do is not only identify those strengths, but again, the VIA website will give you insight and perspective into how you can begin to express these strengths more fully in your life. So again, I would highly recommend that. That was something that I actually did at the beginning of my personal development journey. And from that, I discovered that my strongest signature strength is gratitude. And since then, I've cultivated that attitude of gratitude into my life, and it's completely switched things around for me. Gratitude was what allowed me to overcome the death of my dad. Gratitude is what continuously brings me back on the entrepreneurial journey. Whenever I have stress or fear or doubt, I can bring it back to gratitude and it keeps me on the path to where I want to go. And that's been a huge influence in my life. And all that just came from doing one test. So I'll finish off this first section with a third test, which is the 5 strengths and weaknesses test. So unlike the first two, you don't do this online, but you do it with someone who really knows you. A best friend, a spouse, a parent, a sibling. And what you do, and you can do it for each other, so the other person gets the benefit as well, is, as the title suggests, you tell each other what are your 5 strengths and what are your 5 weaknesses. Now, this is really useful for 2 reasons. First of all, you'll get these strengths and weaknesses that you expected, things that have come up in the previous tests I've told you about. And you'll know and just get some extra clarity and confirmation that, yes, these are things that I'm really expressing and I'm looking to express. But on the flip side, and even more interesting, is when the answers don't collaborate. You see, other people can sometimes know us better than ourselves, and sometimes better than some psychometric tests, no matter how research-based it is. You cannot replace the value and insight that comes from human connection and human intuition. So what can be really interesting is when you get answers you weren't expecting. And this might be for strengths. You think you're good at something, but somebody tells you, maybe you're not. Or, okay, that is one of your strengths, but I don't feel you're really expressing this enough in your life. Or conversely, maybe there's something that you don't actually think you're good at, that you think is a weakness, but actually other people really value that. And you can flip it around and see the positive or the silver lining out of what you thought was a potential weakness. So that can be very powerful. So that's the first piece of advice that I would give you for discovering yourself, the universe, and the meaning of life, is to do these awareness tests, these personality tests. The second thing I'd recommend is learning to sit in silence. Now, this is incredibly uncomfortable for people. Studies have shown, there's some psychologists from Virginia and Harvard, and they asked participants to sit in a room for 15 minutes. They were given no stimulation, nothing to do. All they had to do was just sit in silence. And these participants were provided with a buzzer. And at any time, they could choose to press the buzzer, and it would give them an electric shock. Now, 2/3 of the males and 1/4 of the females in this study chose to shock themselves. These people were so uncomfortable with their own thoughts that they would rather administer an electric shock to themselves. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that is scary. I think it's scary how out of touch we've become with ourselves. We've lost a sense of spirituality in this respect, of not being truly connected and in touch with our inner voice and our inner song. So what I would highly recommend is to cut off the stimulation. We live in this hyper-stimulated world nowadays. We've got technology and people's demands and people's agendas coming in all the time, and we don't get the time to sit in silence and process our thoughts. Now, you can do this through mindfulness and meditation, but try just sitting in silence for a couple minutes a day. At the beginning of my day, as part of my morning routine, I sit in silence for 20 minutes. Not necessarily meditating. I don't focus on the breath and channel my thoughts in the way that you do meditation, but I like to just sit in silence. Now, my dad, my late great dad, he was such an advocate of walking in nature. And he said, David, the silence in nature is absolutely deafening. And walking out in nature myself, when you truly disconnect from everything, when you're far away from people and civilization, I understand what he means. Because there is this connection and energy when you go into nature that really awakens something within us, something very primal, very intrinsic, very spiritual. And in that silence, my dad used to find a lot of clarity and perspective on himself and things that were going on in his life. And I certainly find that too, just doing my 20 minutes of silence each day. In that silence, you get the opportunity to ask yourself questions. And because there's no noise, no distraction, no stimulation coming in, you also get the opportunity to listen to the answers. And there are some very interesting answers that come up in that silence. So that's my second recommendation, is learn to sit in silence. And then the third and final recommendation is journaling. Now, journaling has been a huge game changer for me. There's so many different ways you can journal. I've got journals all over the place. I've got an emotional wellness journal, a business ideas journal, a self-reflection journal, a gratitude journal. The two I'm going to talk about here though are the emotional wellness journal and the self-reflection journal. So the emotional wellness journal is essentially a way to process and externalize our emotions. You see, when we internalize our emotions, they eat us up and they poison us and they're not processed properly. And I lived 2 decades of my life living like this. I insulated all my pain, all my trauma, and I put up these walls and barriers, and it didn't do me any good. It ate me up and it hurt me even more. So what we need to do is process emotions properly. Emotions have a purpose and a reason for their existence. They perform a physiological and psychological function. Thus, we need to learn to externalize them. And a great way to do this is through the journal. So whenever you're feeling sad, angry, frustrated, lonely, then write about it in your emotional wellness journal and really process those emotions. Feel in touch with the emotion. Don't be scared of the pain. Don't be scared of the intensity. Feel it, process it, and channel it into the journal. And here, once you get a little more advanced with the self-awareness, when you've got a slight more understanding of your psychology, then you can start to analyze what you're writing down. And sometimes I find when I'm writing in my emotional wellness journal, I'm coaching myself. I'm saying the things that a coach would say to me. And I find it's a great way of giving myself the Freudian treatment, giving myself some psychoanalysis and saying, David, you're just feeling this because of this, and you're really not listening to yourself. And what you need to do clearly here is, and I will start to realize what the crux of my problem is, and then it's solution time. Then you can go out and resolve the problem. And that all comes from being in touch with the emotions, being honest with yourself, having that safe space to do so. Now, the second type of journaling is the self-reflection journal. And this is kind of personal development 101. You ask any of the leaders in the personal development industry, the Tony Robbins, the Brendan Burchards, they journal religiously. These guys often journal every single day. And what I'd recommend to you guys, if you're starting out, is try it at least once a week. At the end of the week, give yourself some time to sit down and write about what's gone on for you during the week. What have you learnt? What new people have you met? What opportunities came up? What challenges did you encounter? And write about the learning process in these. Reflect on them. How do they make you feel? What do they bring into your life? What things could you have perhaps done better in the week? With the benefit of hindsight, how can you look back and change that scenario or see a new light on an event that happened? And if you do this consistently, it really starts to flip the switch on your self-awareness. These things will start coming to you more on the fly. And instead of having the benefit of hindsight, the benefit of reflection, the changes and attributes you wish to bring into your life will start to happen in the present moment when you're in those scenarios, when you've got that opportunity, when you've got that challenge. And that for me is what the personal development journey is really all about, is that constant quest and thirst and hunger for more knowledge, more education, and more perspective. So guys, I hope these techniques are things that you find useful. I recommend go right now and take one of those personality tests. Have some fun with it, see what comes up, share it with your spouse, your friends, your siblings. Have a game with it. See who is which codes. Try and guess after you've done the test what your friends will come out as, or what your spouse will come out as, or what your children will come out as. make it into a game, because at the end of the day, this should also be fun. You know, I find personal development really fun because I love learning these things, and you can use your creativity and your imagination and really spark these things up for you. So that's what I recommend. Go ahead, do one of those tests, and I hope that all of you are able to find yourselves a little more, and perhaps together we will answer that massive question. Why are we here? Who are we? What is the meaning of life? So until next time, guys, remember to love inwardly with a bit of self-awareness and then shine outwardly. Be speaking to you soon. David.